The parking lot stretched out before me like a battlefield, scattered with SUVs and minivans that screamed suburban success. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel as I sat in my rented Honda, watching former classmates stream through the entrance of the Marriott ballroom. 20 years. 20 years since I'd walked the halls of Westfield High, and somehow I'd convinced myself this was a good idea. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The invitation had arrived 3 months ago, glossy cardstock with our school colors splashed across the front. Westfield High Class of 2004 to 20-year reunion. Come see how far we've all come. The irony wasn't lost on me. How far had I come? Far enough to rent a basic sedan because I didn't want to draw attention to what I'd actually built. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant back in San Francisco. Board meeting moved to Thursday. Also, TechCrunch wants to schedule that interview about the acquisition. I smiled, sliding the phone back into my purse. If only they knew. The ballroom doors opened again, and I caught a glimpse of familiar faces. Jennifer Walsh, now Jennifer Morrison according to her Facebook profile, still blonde and perfectly put together. Behind her, the unmistakable bulk of Brad Hoffman, our former quarterback who'd apparently traded his Letterman jacket for a real estate license. They were laughing about something, probably reminiscing about the good old days when the world made sense and everyone knew their place. My place had been clear enough. Anna Chen, the quiet Asian girl who ate lunch alone in the library, who wore the same 3 outfits on rotation because my mother worked double shifts at the hospital just to keep us afloat. The girl who got perfect grades but never got picked for group projects unless the teacher assigned them. The girl who Brad once called Ghost Girl because I was so forgettable I might as well have been invisible. I'd spent 4 years perfecting the art of invisibility. Head down, mouth shut, dreams locked away where no one could mock them. While my classmates worried about prom dates and college parties, I was coding in my bedroom until 3 a.m., building websites for local businesses to help my mom pay the bills. They saw poverty and limitation. I saw opportunity and possibility. The memory hit me like a slap. Senior year, computer science class. Mrs. Patterson had assigned us to present our final projects, and I'd spent weeks perfecting mine, a prototype for what would eventually become the foundation of my first startup. I'd talked about artificial intelligence, about machine learning, about how technology could revolutionize the way people connected with services they needed. The silence in that classroom had been deafening. Then Brad had started laughing, that cruel, braying sound that had haunted my nightmares for years. AI? Seriously? Anna thinks she's going to be some tech genius or something. The whole class had joined in. Even the teacher had looked embarrassed for me. Maybe stick to something more realistic, she'd said, her voice dripping with that particular brand of pity teachers reserved for students who dreamed too big. Jennifer had been the worst. She'd turned in her seat, perfect pink lips curved in a smile that cut like glass. Some people just need to accept their limitations, she'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Not everyone can be special. The words had burned themselves into my memory, a constant reminder of how the world saw me. But that was then. Now I owned 3 companies, had a net worth that would make their heads spin, and lived in a penthouse overlooking the San Francisco Bay. The scared girl who'd presented that project was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned to turn every no into fuel for the fire that burned inside her. So why was I sitting in a rental car, hands shaking like I was 18 again? Please inside her. Because part of me still was. Part of me was still that girl who'd gone home that night and cried herself to sleep, who'd torn up her acceptance letter to MIT because she couldn't afford the tuition, who'd spent her first 2 years at community college wondering if everyone had been right about her limitations. The story I'd told myself for 20 years was simple. I'd show them. I'd become successful, powerful, wealthy, and then I'd come back and watch their faces when they realized how wrong they'd been. It was a fantasy that had sustained me through 18-hour workdays, failed relationships, and the crushing loneliness of building an empire with no one to share it with. Now I was here, and the fantasy felt smaller somehow, more fragile. What if they still saw the same scared girl? What if success hadn't changed me as much as I'd hoped? What if I walked into that ballroom and became 18 again, invisible and insignificant? Hassan. I pulled down the visor mirror and checked my reflection. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the girl who'd graduated from this place. My hair was styled in a sharp bob that cost more than most people's rent. My makeup was flawless, applied by a professional who came to my apartment every morning. The simple black dress I wore looked understated, but I knew the price tag would shock them. Everything about me screamed success, from my designer heels to the confidence I'd learned to wear like armor. But underneath it all, I was still Anna Chen, the girl who'd never been good enough for them. The parking lot was starting to empty as more people made their way inside. I could see them through the windows now, mingling with drinks in their hands, name tags stuck to their chests like badges of honor. They'd aged, most of them. The cheerleaders had settled into suburban motherhood, the football players had developed beer guts, the popular kids had become middle management, and real estate agents, and insurance salesmen. Ordinary lives. Predictable lives. The kind of lives they'd expected everyone to live. The TOs had say-cawed. I thought about the Tesla sitting in my garage back home, the one I'd bought on a whim after my last company sold for 8 figures. I thought about the Rolex on my wrist, a gift to myself after landing my first major client. I thought about the penthouse, the private jet I'd chartered last month for a business trip to Tokyo, the wardrobe full of clothes that cost more than most people's cars. Material things? Maybe. But they represented something deeper. They represented every door that had been slammed in my face, every dream that had been dismissed, every time someone had looked at me and seen nothing worth noticing. They represented the girl who'd been told to accept her limitations and had refused to listen. The funny thing was, I'd almost not come. My calendar was packed with meetings, conferences, and product launches. I had a company to run, investors to please, employees depending on me. What was the point of revisiting ancient history? What did it matter what a bunch of people I'd never see again thought about me? But then I remembered Jennifer's words. Not everyone can be special. The casual cruelty of it. The way she delivered it like a simple fact of nature. Like gravity or the sunrise. Some people rise, some people fall, and some people never get off the ground at all. I'd spent 20 years proving her wrong. Now I wanted to see her face when she realized it. The Honda's engine ticked as it cooled, and I could smell the faint aroma of the hotel's restaurant drifting through the vents. Prime rib and roasted vegetables, the kind of meal that would have been a luxury when I was growing up. Now it was just another Thursday night. My phone buzzed again. A photo from my assistant, the latest prototype from our R&D department, sleek and cutting edge, and exactly the kind of thing that would have gotten me laughed out of that computer science classroom. Looks perfect, I texted back. Ship it to the beta testers. A group of women walked past my car, their laughter bright and brittle in the evening air. I recognized them immediately. The popular girls, the ones who'd ruled the cafeteria and the hallways with their perfect hair and their perfect lives. They'd aged better than most, probably thanks to personal trainers and expensive skincare, but there was something desperate about their laughter now. Something that spoke of dreams deferred and compromises made. Hazat equal snakeesser. They'd been the princesses of our little kingdom, the ones everyone wanted to be or be with. Now they were just middle-aged women at a hotel reunion, trying to recapture something that had probably never been as golden as they remembered. I wondered if they'd remember me at all. Probably not. I'd been background noise in their perfect lives, a forgettable figure who'd existed on the periphery of their world. The girl who'd tutored their boyfriends in calculus, who'd helped them with their computer problems, who'd been useful when they needed something but invisible when they didn't. That invisibility had been my superpower, in a way. While they'd been focused on social hierarchies and popularity contests, I'd been learning. While they'd been at parties, I'd been building. While they'd been living for the moment, I'd been planning for the future. Present. The future that was now my present. I checked my watch, the Rolex that would soon become part of this story. 7:30. The reunion had started at 7, which meant I was fashionably late. Or maybe just late. Either way, it was time to stop hiding in the parking lot like a coward. Man. I took one last look at myself in the mirror, straightened my shoulders, and opened the car door. The evening air was warm and humid, typical for Chicago in September. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder that the world had kept spinning long after we'd all graduated and scattered to the four winds. As I walked toward the hotel entrance, I passed the Tesla I'd driven here but had parked 3 blocks away. It gleamed under the streetlight, all clean lines and quiet power. Tomorrow, it would matter. Tonight, I was just Anna Chen, returning to the place where she'd learned that the world's opinion of her didn't have to define her future. The hotel lobby was elegant in that chain hotel way, all marble and brass and carefully curated sophistication. I could hear the sound of my reunion drifting from the ballroom, voices raised in conversation, the clink of glasses, the opening notes of a song that had been popular when we were seniors. "Welcome to the Westfield High Class of 2004 reunion." The volunteer at the registration table looked up at me with a bright smile. She was younger, probably a recent graduate herself, hired to help with the event. Name? Anna Chen. She flipped through a box of name tags, her smile never wavering. "Here you are. Have a great time catching up with everyone." I clipped the name tag to my dress and looked down at it. Anna Chen, class of 2004. Below that, in smaller text. Then, future computer programmer. "Now, tell us what you're up to." I almost laughed. Future computer programmer. Even my 18-year-old self had been selling herself short. The ballroom hit me like a wave of nostalgia, mixed with cheap cologne and overpriced wine. Red and gold streamers hung from the ceiling, our school colors displayed with the same enthusiasm they'd had 20 years ago. Round tables scattered across the room, each one surrounded by faces that time had softened but couldn't quite disguise. The DJ was playing Mr. Brightside. Apparently some songs never died. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the crowd. Groups had already formed, invisible boundaries drawn just like they'd been in high school. The athletes clustered near the bar, their voices loud and confident. The theater kids had claimed a corner table, gesturing dramatically as they recounted old stories. The honor students sat primly at a table near the front, looking like they were still competing for the teacher's approval. And there, holding court at the center table like she owned the place, was Jennifer Morrison. She'd barely changed. Still blonde, still perfectly put together, still surrounded by her faithful court of admirers. She wore a red dress that probably cost more than my first car, and her laugh carried across the room like she was performing for an audience. Which, I realized, she was. I took a deep breath and walked into the room, my heels clicking against the polished floor. A few people glanced my way, their eyes sliding past me with the same disinterest they'd shown in high school. Anonymous faces in a crowd I'd once desperately wanted to join. "Anna? Anna Chen?" I turned to find David Kim approaching. His face lit up with genuine surprise. David had been one of the few people who'd ever bothered to talk to me in high school. Another quiet kid who'd spent more time in the computer lab than the cafeteria. He looked good, settled, wearing a wedding ring and a smile that reached his eyes. "David," I said, returning his smile. "How are you?" "I'm great, actually. Married, 2 kids, working for Google up in Mountain View." "You?" Before I could answer, a voice cut through our conversation like a blade. "Oh my God, is that Anna Chen?" The voice belonged to Jessica Martinez, one of Jennifer's lieutenants. She approached with the kind of predatory smile that had made my high school years miserable, her eyes already cataloging my appearance, searching for weaknesses. "Jessica," I said evenly, "nice to see you." "I can't believe you actually came," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I mean, I know these things can be intimidating when you don't have much to show for yourself, but good for you for showing up anyway." David's eyebrows shot up. "Jessica, what the hell?" But Jessica was already moving away, her mission accomplished. Within seconds, I could see her whispering to another group, their eyes turning toward me with the hungry interest of sharks scenting blood in the water. "Ignore her," David said quietly. "Some people never grow up." But it was too late. The damage was done. I could feel the familiar tightness in my chest, the old insecurities crawling back to the surface like roaches in the dark. 20 years of success, of building something from nothing, and one casual insult had reduced me to the scared girl I'd once been. Anna Chen. Well, I'll be damned. Brad Hoffman's voice boomed across the room as he approached, his face flushed with alcohol and misplaced confidence. He'd put on weight since high school, his varsity jacket swagger replaced by the forced joviality of a man who'd peaked at 18. "Brad," I said, forcing a smile. "Ghost Girl herself," he said, using that old nickname like it was a term of endearment. "I heard you were coming tonight. Gotta say, I'm surprised. Figured you'd be too busy with your… what do you do again? Still doing that computer stuff?" "Something like that," I said. "That's cute," he said, taking a long sip from his beer. "I'm in commercial real estate now, just closed a deal worth $3 million. Not bad for a dumb jock, right?" He was showing off, marking his territory like he had in high school. But there was something desperate about it now, a need to prove himself that hadn't existed when he was 17 and the world was his oyster. "That's great, Brad," I said. "Yeah, well, we can't all be superstars," he said, his smile turning mean. "But hey, at least you're trying, right? That's what matters." He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends, but his grip was too hard, too possessive. A reminder of who had power and who didn't. "Brad, leave her alone," David said. But Brad was already walking away, his laughter trailing behind him like smoke. More people began to notice me now, drawn by the commotion. I could feel their eyes on me, measuring, judging, finding me wanting. The whispers started, barely audible but impossible to ignore. "Is that Anna Chen? She looks exactly the same. I wonder what she's doing now. Probably still living with her mom." The voices blended together into a chorus of casual cruelty, each comment a small cut that added up to something bigger. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller, more invisible. All my success, all my achievements, meant nothing in this room. Here, I was still just the weird girl who didn't belong. "Anna!" The voice was bright, cheerful, and deadly. Jennifer Morrison was approaching, her entourage trailing behind her like a wake of destruction. She moved with the same predatory grace she'd had in high school, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Jennifer," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I heard you were here," she said, her eyes scanning my appearance with surgical precision. You look exactly the same. That's so sweet." The insult was wrapped in a compliment, poisonous and pretty. Her friends giggled, high-pitched sounds that reminded me of hyenas circling wounded prey. "So tell me," Jennifer continued, "what have you been up to? I mean, besides the obvious." "The obvious? Well, you know," she said, gesturing vaguely at my appearance. "Still single, still struggling, still living that simple life. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. Not everyone can be extraordinary." The words hit me like a physical blow. The same dismissal, the same casual cruelty, delivered with the same perfect smile. She hadn't changed at all. None of them had. "I saw your LinkedIn," she continued, twisting the knife. "It's so cute how you call yourself an entrepreneur. Everyone's an entrepreneur these days, aren't they? It's like, just because you have a little side business doesn't mean you're Steve Jobs, right?" Her friends laughed, the sound echoing across the room. Other conversations stopped as people turned to watch the show. I was the entertainment now, the freak show attraction they'd all come to gawk at. "I mean, look at me," Jennifer said, her voice rising for the benefit of her audience. "I married Robert Morrison. You know Morrison Industries? We have houses in the Hamptons and Aspen. I chair 3 different charities. I'm on the board of the Children's Hospital. That's what success looks like." She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming, her smile predatory. "But you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the room, "you're still just Anna Chen. Still the same little nobody you always were. Still dreaming about being special when everyone knows you're just ordinary." The room was silent now, waiting for my response. I could feel the weight of their expectations, their hunger for my humiliation. They wanted me to break down, to cry, to confirm every cruel thing they'd ever believed about me. And for a moment, I almost did. I felt the familiar burn of tears behind my eyes, the crushing weight of their judgment. All my success, all my achievements, felt like lies in that moment. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just a fraud, a pretender who'd convinced herself she was something special when she was really just the same scared girl she'd always been. "Kat, got your tongue?" Jennifer asked, her smile widening. "Or are you just trying to think of something impressive to say? Because honestly, sweetie, we all know the truth. Some people are meant for greatness, and some people are meant to, well, be you." The laughter that followed was worse than anything I'd experienced in high school. It was meaner, more deliberate, delivered by adults who should have known better. But cruelty aged like wine. Apparently, it only got more potent with time. I looked around the room, at the faces of people I'd once hoped to impress, and I saw something I hadn't seen clearly before. They were all trapped here, in this moment, in this version of themselves that had peaked 20 years ago. They were still playing the same games, still fighting the same battles, still desperate to prove they were winners, in a contest that had ended decades ago. Jennifer was still talking, her voice a sharp buzz in my ears. Something about how sad it was that some people never learned to accept reality. How important it was to have realistic expectations about life. Her friends were nodding along, adding their own barbs, their own casual cruelties. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was thinking about the Tesla parked 3 blocks away, the key fob sitting in my purse like a loaded gun. I was thinking about the Rolex on my wrist, hidden under my sleeve, waiting for its moment. I was thinking about the empire I'd built while they'd been playing house and planning charity galas. Most of all, I was thinking about the girl who'd stood in this same spot 20 years ago, who'd been told she wasn't special, who'd been dismissed and diminished and written off as ordinary. That girl had been wrong about a lot of things, but she'd been right about one thing. She'd refused to accept their limitations. "Are you even listening to me?" Jennifer asked, her voice sharp with irritation. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd missed before. Beneath the perfect makeup and the designer dress, beneath the practiced smile and the rehearsed superiority, she was terrified. Terrified that her reign was over, that her moment in the sun had passed, that the world had moved on without her. "Sorry," I said, my voice steady now. "I was just thinking about something." "Oh?" she said, her eyebrows raised. "And what's that?" I smiled, and for the first time all evening it felt genuine. "I was thinking about how much things can change in 20 years. Jennifer's smile faltered, just for a moment. But she recovered quickly, her mask sliding back into place. "Well, yes," she said. "Some things change. But some things stay exactly the same. And some people," she looked directly at me, "never change at all." The crowd around us had grown larger, drawn by the spectacle. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out, cameras aimed in my direction. This would be on social media within minutes, the reunion where Anna Chen got put in her place, where nobody got reminded of her nothingness. "You're right," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Some things do stay exactly the same." Jennifer's smile was triumphant now, victorious. She'd won, just like she always had. The queen bee had defended her throne, and the pretender had been exposed for what she really was. "I'm glad you finally understand," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's so much easier when people just accept who they are." "You know what, Jennifer?" I said, my voice growing stronger. "You're absolutely right. Some people never change. Some people stay exactly the same, playing the same games, fighting the same battles, desperate to prove they're still relevant." Her smile wavered. "But some people," I continued, "some people become something extraordinary, something you could never imagine. Something that would make your little charity boards and your husband's money look like pocket change." The room was dead silent now. Even the DJ had stopped playing, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "And you know what the beautiful thing is?" I said, my voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "You're about to find out exactly who I really am." The silence that followed my words was electric, charged with anticipation and disbelief. Jennifer's perfect composure cracked for just a moment, uncertainty flickering across her features like a candle in the wind. But she recovered quickly, her practiced smile sliding back into place like armor. "Oh, Anna," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Always so dramatic. You haven't changed a bit, have you? Still living in that little fantasy world where you're the hero of your own story." Her followers giggled, but the sound was nervous now, uncertain. They could sense something had shifted, but they couldn't quite put their finger on what. "Fantasy?" I repeated, my voice calm and measured. "Is that what you think this is?" "Honey, we've all seen your life," Jennifer said, gesturing dismissively. "Living in that tiny apartment. Driving that beat-up Honda. Working at some little tech startup that nobody's ever heard of. There's nothing wrong with being ordinary, but let's not pretend it's something it's not." The crowd around us had grown thicker, pressing closer like spectators at a gladiator match. I could smell their excitement, their hunger for drama. This was better than any high school gossip they'd ever witnessed. "You researched me," I said, and something in my tone made Jennifer's smile falter again. "I mean, it's all public record," she said quickly. "Social media, LinkedIn. It's not like you're hiding anything important." "You're right," I said, reaching into my purse. "I'm not hiding anything important. In fact, I think it's time I stopped hiding anything at all." My fingers found the Tesla key fob, sleek and black and utterly unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what it was. I pulled it out, holding it casually in my palm. "You see this?" I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. Jennifer squinted at the small device, her brow furrowing in confusion. "It's a key?" "Not just any key," I said, pressing the button. The response was immediate and unmistakable. From somewhere outside, the distinctive honk of a Tesla horn echoed through the hotel walls. 2 short beeps, clear and proud and impossible to ignore. The room erupted in murmurs. Heads turned toward the windows, people pressed closer. Phones appeared as the crowd tried to process what they'd just heard. "That can't be yours," Jennifer said, but her voice had lost its confidence. "Can't it?" I asked, walking toward the ballroom's floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the parking lot. The crowd followed me like a tide, pressing against the glass. I pressed the horn again, and again the sound echoed through the night. But this time, something else happened. The Tesla's lights flashed, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Even from 3 blocks away, the car was visible, sleek and expensive, and undeniably mine. "Holy shit," someone whispered behind me. "That's a Model S Plaid." "Those start at like, what, 130,000? Another voice added. Jennifer pushed through the crowd, her face pale in the reflected light from the windows. You rented it," she said, but the words sounded hollow even to her. "Did I?" I asked, pulling out my phone. A few swipes brought up the Tesla app, showing the car's location, its charge level, its climate settings. Funny thing about rental cars, they usually don't have custom settings saved under your name. The crowd pressed closer, craning their necks to see the phone screen. I held it up, letting them see the interface that clearly showed the vehicle registered to Anna Chen, San Francisco, California. "But that's impossible," Jessica Martinez said, pushing forward. "You can't afford something like that, you're nobody." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Nobody. The same word they'd used to define me for 4 years of high school, the same dismissal they'd carried with them for 20 years. Nobody. I repeated, my voice soft but dangerous. "That's what you all said about the girl who spent her lunch money on coding books. The girl who taught herself programming while you were at parties. The girl who built her first website at 14 while you were worried about prom dates." I turned away from the window, facing the crowd that had gathered around me. Their faces were a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and dawning realization. "You want to know what I've been doing for the past 20 years?" I asked, my voice growing stronger. "While you've been playing your little games of social media one-upmanship and charity board politics?" Jennifer opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "I built something," I said. "Something real. Something that changed the world in ways you couldn't even imagine. I reached for my sleeve, pulling it back to reveal the Rolex Submariner that had been hidden beneath the fabric. The watch caught the ballroom lights, its steel and gold surface gleaming like liquid fire. The gasps were audible now. Several people pulled out their phones, zooming in on the timepiece that cost more than most people's cars. $35,000, Brad Hoffman whispered, his voice awed. I looked at one of those last month. Couldn't even afford the down payment. Is that what you think this is about? I asked, turning to face him. Money? Status symbols? The kind of shallow materialism that you all worship? I unclasped the watch, holding it in my palm like it weighed nothing. This watch? I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. I bought this on a Tuesday afternoon because I was bored. It was an impulse purchase, like buying a candy bar at the grocery store. The room was dead silent now. Even the DJ had stopped pretending to work, abandoning his booth to listen. You want to know what else I bought that week? I continued. A company. A small robotics firm in Tokyo that was about to go bankrupt. $53 million. Cash. Jennifer's face had gone white. You're lying. Am I? I pulled out my phone again, this time opening my banking app. The numbers on the screen were partially obscured for security, but enough was visible to make the crowd gasp collectively. That's... David Kim stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. That's 8 figures. The current balance in my primary checking account, I said casually. Not counting investments, real estate, or the 3 companies I own outright. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every person who had ever dismissed me, diminished me, or told me I wasn't special enough to matter. You see, while you were all here in Chicago, playing house and climbing corporate ladders and fighting over scraps of suburban success, I was in Silicon Valley building an empire. The silence was deafening. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, the desperate scramble to reconcile the person they'd dismissed with the reality standing before them. My first company, I continued, was an AI platform that predicted consumer behavior for e-commerce sites. I sold it to Amazon when I was 26 for $47 million. Jennifer made a small sound, like air being let out of a balloon. My second company developed machine learning algorithms for medical diagnosis. Google acquired us 3 years ago for $230 million. The numbers were getting too big for them to process. I could see it in their faces. The complete inability to reconcile their image of me with the reality I was presenting. And my current company, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, develops quantum computing applications for financial modeling. We just closed our Series C funding round last month, $800 million. Brad Hoffman sat down heavily in a nearby chair, his face ashen. $800 million? Not my personal worth, I clarified. The company valuation. My personal net worth is considerably higher. I looked directly at Jennifer, whose perfect composure had completely crumbled. She looked like she'd been struck by lightning, her mouth hanging open, her carefully styled hair askew. But you know what the really beautiful part is? I said, stepping closer to her. All of this. The cars, the watches, the houses, the money. It's just the scorecard. The real victory is standing here, looking at all of you, and realizing that your opinion of me never mattered at all. Jennifer found her voice, though it came out as barely a croak. But how? You were nobody. You were nothing. I was invisible, I corrected. There's a difference. While you were all performing for each other, competing for social status in your little bubble, I was learning, growing, building something that actually mattered. The crowd around us had shifted, their energy completely changed. Where before they'd been hungry for my humiliation, now they were hungry for details, for connection, for some way to associate themselves with success. Anna, David Kim stepped forward, his voice filled with genuine admiration. I had no idea. This is incredible. The girl who ate lunch alone in the library, I said, looking around the room. The girl who couldn't afford new clothes, who got laughed at for her dreams. She never forgot what it felt like to be dismissed. She never forgot what it felt like to be told she wasn't special. I turned back to Jennifer, whose face was now streaked with tears that were ruining her perfect makeup. But most importantly, I said, my voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. She never forgot who told her she wasn't special, and she spent 20 years making sure you'd remember this moment for the rest of your lives. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the hungry silence of spectators waiting for blood. It was the stunned silence of people whose entire worldview had just been shattered. "The reservation," Jennifer whispered, her voice broken. "At the Four Seasons. The penthouse suite? That was you?" I smiled, remembering the call I'd made that morning. The most expensive suite in the most expensive hotel in Chicago, booked on a whim, because I wanted to sleep well before facing my past. "The penthouse suite," I confirmed. $14,000 a night. I booked it for a week because I wasn't sure how long I'd want to stay in Chicago. The crowd erupted in whispers, phones appearing as people frantically Googled the Four Seasons penthouse, trying to verify what I'd just told them. "But the car," Brad said weakly, "that Honda in the parking lot." "A rental," I said simply. "I flew in on a private jet, but I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted to see who you all really were before I revealed who I really am." I looked around the room one final time, taking in the faces of people who had shaped my childhood, who had taught me what cruelty looked like, who had driven me to prove them wrong in ways they could never have imagined. "The girl you knew in high school?" I said, my voice carrying a note of finality. "She's gone. She died the day she realized that your limitations were not her limitations, that your small dreams were not her small dreams, that your definition of success was not the only definition that mattered." I clipped the Rolex back onto my wrist, the weight of it familiar and comforting. "And in her place," I continued, "stands someone you never bothered to see, someone you never bothered to know. Someone who built something extraordinary while you were all still playing the same petty games you learned in high school." Jennifer was crying openly now, her perfect facade completely destroyed. Around her, her former followers looked uncertain, lost, like courtiers who had just realized their queen had no clothes. "So thank you," I said, addressing the entire room. "Thank you for teaching me that I was never meant to fit in here. Thank you for showing me that your approval was never worth having. And thank you for giving me the motivation to become someone who could stand here tonight and show you exactly what you missed." I turned toward the exit, done with this place and these people, ready to walk away from my past and into a future they could never touch. But then Jennifer's voice stopped me, desperate and pleading. "Anna, wait, please. We didn't know, we couldn't have known." I paused at the ballroom entrance, looking back at the woman who had once held such power over my self-worth. "No," I said simply, "you couldn't have known. Because you never bothered to look." The hotel lobby felt like a sanctuary after the chaos of the ballroom. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked away from 20 years of buried resentment, each step lighter than the last. Behind me, I could hear the muffled explosion of voices as the reunion crowd processed what had just happened. Phones were buzzing, social media was lighting up, and Jennifer Morrison's perfect world was crumbling in real time. I made it halfway across the lobby before I heard footsteps behind me. "Anna, wait up." I turned to find David Kim jogging after me, his face flushed with excitement and something that looked like vindication. He'd loosened his tie, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled from pushing through the crowd. "I can't believe what just happened in there," he said, breathing hard. "I mean, I knew you'd done well for yourself, but this is insane." "Is it?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. David had been one of the few people who'd treated me like a human being in high school. His opinion actually mattered to me. "Anna, you just nuked their entire worldview," he said, grinning. "Did you see Jennifer's face? I've never seen someone look so completely destroyed." There was satisfaction in his voice, and I realized that David had his own scores to settle with the popular crowd. They'd dismissed him too, labeled him as just another nerdy Asian kid who was good at math but not much else. "You seem pretty happy about it," I observed. "Are you kidding? After what they just put you through?" David shook his head. The way they treated you in there was disgusting. Adults acting like teenagers, trying to relive their glory days by putting someone else down. He paused, studying my face. But you knew this would happen, didn't you? You came here planning to drop that bomb. I considered the question. Had I planned it? Or had I just been prepared for it? I came here hoping I'd grown enough that their opinions wouldn't matter, I said honestly. But when Jennifer started with the same cruel nonsense from 20 years ago, I realized some people never change. They're still trapped in high school, still playing the same games. So you decided to change the game entirely, David said with admiration. Before I could respond, the ballroom doors burst open and a stream of people poured into the lobby. Some were heading for the exits, probably rushing home to Google everything I'd told them. Others were scanning the lobby, clearly looking for me. "Anna!" a voice called out from the crowd. It was Michelle Thompson, one of the theater kids who'd always been nice enough but had never quite had the courage to stand up to the popular crowd. She approached hesitantly, like she was afraid I might vanish if she moved too quickly. "Michelle," I said, forcing a smile. The adrenaline from my confrontation with Jennifer was starting to fade, leaving me feeling drained. "I just wanted to say," she began, her words tumbling over each other, "what you did there was amazing. The way you stood up to them. I always admired you in high school, you know. You were so smart, so focused. I used to wish I had your confidence." "My confidence?" I almost laughed. "Michelle, I spent 4 years terrified of my own shadow. But you never let them break you," she insisted. "Even when they were cruel, you never stopped believing in yourself." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that they had broken me, repeatedly and thoroughly, that I'd spent countless nights crying myself to sleep, wondering if they were right about my limitations. But looking at her face so earnest and hopeful, I realized that maybe the truth was more complicated than that. Hopeful. Maybe I had believed in myself, even when I didn't realize it. Maybe every hour I'd spent coding instead of trying to fit in, every dream I'd refused to abandon despite their mockery, had been an act of faith in my own worth. "Thank you," I said simply. More people were approaching now, a steady stream of former classmates who suddenly wanted to reconnect with the nobody who'd turned out to be somebody extraordinary. I could see the calculation in their eyes, the wheels turning as they tried to figure out how to benefit from my success. "Anna, hi, remember me? Sarah Johnson? We were in AP Chemistry together." "Anna! Oh my God, I can't believe it's really you. You look amazing." "Hey, Anna, I don't know if you remember, but we worked on that group project together junior year." The lies came fast and thick. Sarah Johnson had never spoken to me outside of copying my homework. The girl claiming I looked amazing had spent 4 years calling me discount Asian behind my back. And the group project collaboration consisted of me doing all the work while they took credit. But now I was valuable. Now I was worth knowing. Now they all remembered being my friend. "Excuse me," David said loudly, stepping between me and the growing crowd. "Can you all give her some space? She doesn't owe any of you her time." The crowd hesitated, uncertain. They wanted to get closer, to touch success, to somehow absorb some of my accomplishment through proximity. But David's protective stance made them reconsider. Actually, a new voice cut through the chatter. "I think Anna and I need to have a conversation." I turned to see my old chemistry teacher, Mrs. Henderson, approaching through the crowd. She was in her 70s now, her hair silver instead of brown, but her sharp eyes were exactly as I remembered them. Unlike everyone else, she didn't look excited or calculating. She looked thoughtful. "Mrs. Henderson," I said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I come to these reunions sometimes," she said. "I like to see how my students turned out. May I have a word?" The crowd parted reluctantly as she led me to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the chaos and the cameras and the suddenly desperate former classmates. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. I blinked, caught off guard. "What for?" "For not doing more," she said simply. "I saw how they treated you. I saw the bullying, the exclusion, the way they made you feel small. And I didn't stop it. You were just a teacher, I said. You couldn't control everything. I could have done more, she insisted. I could have made your presentations mandatory viewing. I could have talked to the principal about the harassment. I could have recognized your potential and helped you get the resources you needed. She paused, looking at me with those sharp eyes that had once made me nervous during pop quizzes. Instead, I let a brilliant student suffer because I was too afraid of rocking the boat, too worried about maintaining classroom harmony to protect the student who needed it most. Her words hit me harder than Jennifer's cruelty had. Mrs. Henderson had been one of my favorite teachers, one of the few adults who'd seemed to appreciate my intelligence. Learning that she'd seen my suffering and chosen not to act was more painful than any teenage insult. I read about your companies, she continued. I've been following your career for years, and every achievement, every success story, every time I see your name in the tech news, I think about that scared girl in my classroom and wonder what might have been different if I'd been braver. Mrs. Henderson, let me finish, she said firmly. What you've accomplished is extraordinary, but what you did in there tonight, standing up to them, refusing to let them diminish you, that took a different kind of courage, the kind I should have shown 20 years ago. I felt tears prick at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. This conversation was harder than facing down Jennifer and her mean girls. This was about lost opportunities, about the adult who should have protected me but didn't. I forgive you, I said, and meant it. But more than that, I understand. You were doing your best in an impossible situation. She nodded, tears visible in her own eyes. I'm proud of you, Anna. Not just for your success, but for who you've become. That girl in my classroom, she deserved better. But she grew up to be someone remarkable anyway. She had help, I said, thinking of all the people who had believed in me along the way. Not from here, maybe, but from somewhere. Mrs. Henderson smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from anyone connected to my high school experience. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. In all the excitement of the revelation, all the satisfaction of proving my worth, no one had asked about happiness. They'd asked about money, about companies, about success, but not about happiness. I think so, I said slowly. It's complicated. Success comes with its own challenges. But yes, I think I'm happy, or at least, I'm content with who I've become. She nodded approvingly. Good, because all the money in the world doesn't matter if you're miserable. Anna! David's voice cut through our conversation. You might want to see this. He was holding his phone, his face a mixture of amusement and concern. I walked over, Mrs. Henderson following behind. What is it? Check Twitter, he said, handing me the phone. You're trending. I looked at the screen, watching in real time as videos from the reunion spread across social media. Someone had live-streamed my confrontation with Jennifer, and it was going viral. The hashtag #ReunionRevenge was climbing the trending charts, with thousands of retweets and comments. Holy shit, I muttered, scrolling through the responses. Most were supportive, celebrating the underdog's triumph. But there were negative comments too, people calling me cruel or suggesting the whole thing was fake. It gets better, David said, taking the phone back and showing me another screen. Someone figured out who you really are. Your Wikipedia page is getting hammered with traffic, and your company's stock is up 12% in after-hours trading. I stared at the numbers, watching my net worth increase in real time as traders reacted to the unexpected publicity. It was surreal, like watching my life become a spectacle for strangers' entertainment. This is insane, I said. This is what happens when you're actually famous and people don't know it, David replied. You just outed yourself as one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country, at a high school reunion, in Chicago. People are losing their minds. More former classmates were approaching, drawn by the phone screens and the growing excitement. But their energy was different now, more desperate, more calculating. They weren't just curious anymore, they were hungry. Anna, hey, I was wondering if you might be interested in investing in my startup. Anna, I have this great business idea, and I know you're always looking for the next big thing. Anna, My company is doing a Series A round, and I think you'd be really interested in what we're building. The pitches came fast and shamelessly. People who'd ignored me for 20 years suddenly convinced me I owed them a chance at my money. It was disgusting and predictable and exactly what I'd expected. Enough, Mrs. Henderson said sharply, her teacher's voice cutting through the chaos. All of you, back off. Can't you see you're proving everything she said about you? The crowd hesitated, looking sheepish under her stern gaze. Even 20 years later, she still had the power to make grown adults feel like scolded children. Thank you, I said to her quietly. Don't mention it, she replied. Some things never change. Bullies are still bullies, even when they're wearing suits and asking for money instead of lunch money. David stepped closer, lowering his voice. You want to get out of here? I've got my car in the parking garage. We could grab coffee somewhere quiet, away from all this. I looked around the lobby, at the former classmates with their phones and their desperate pitches, at the chaos I'd created with a few simple revelations. This wasn't how I'd imagined the evening ending. I'd thought there would be satisfaction in proving them wrong, vindication in showing them my success. Wah, Singi. Instead, I felt empty. Hollow. Like I'd won a game that wasn't worth playing. Yeah, I said to David. Let's get out of here. As we headed toward the parking garage, I heard Jennifer's voice behind us, shrill and desperate. Anna! Anna, please! We need to talk! I didn't turn around. I'd said everything I needed to say to Jennifer Morrison. Now it was time to focus on what came next. The coffee shop David chose was a small, intimate place tucked away in Lincoln Park, far from the chaos we'd left behind at the reunion. Exposed brick walls lined with local artwork, the soft hum of conversation and the rich aroma of freshly ground beans created an atmosphere that felt like a sanctuary. We found a corner table where I could sit with my back to the wall, a habit I'd developed over years of high-stakes business meetings. Double espresso, I told the barista, settling into the worn leather chair. David ordered something complicated with oat milk and extra foam, which made me smile despite everything. Some things never changed. So, he said once we were alone, how are you processing all of this? I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic cup, using the heat to ground myself in the present moment. Honestly, I'm not sure. I thought I'd feel more satisfied, more vindicated. But you don't? I paused, searching for the right words. Empty, maybe? Like I just spent 20 years climbing a mountain, only to realize the view from the top isn't what I expected. David leaned back in his chair, studying me with those thoughtful eyes that had made him one of the few people I'd trusted in high school. What did you expect? Justice, I suppose. Some cosmic balancing of the scales. Proof that hard work and determination always win in the end. I took a sip of the espresso, savoring its bitter intensity. Instead, I just feel like I've become someone I don't entirely recognize. What do you mean? I set down my cup, considering how to explain the complexity of what I was feeling. The girl they knew in high school would never have humiliated someone publicly like that. She was too kind, too afraid of hurting people's feelings. But the woman I've become? She calculated exactly how to destroy Jennifer's worldview and did it with surgical precision. Jennifer deserved it, David said firmly. After the way she treated you tonight, after the way she treated you for 4 years. Did she, though? I interrupted. Or did I just become the thing I once hated? Someone who uses power to make others feel small? The question hung between us like smoke. David opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, really thinking about what I'd said. You know what the difference is? He said finally. Jennifer attacked you for existing. For having the audacity to show up and take up space. You defended yourself against someone who was actively trying to hurt you. By destroying her in front of a room full of people. By making sure everyone saw her humiliation. By telling the truth, David corrected. Everything you said in there was true, wasn't it? Your companies, your success, your net worth? Yes, but. No buts. You didn't lie, you didn't exaggerate, you didn't make anything up. You simply revealed who you really are, to people who had made assumptions about who you were. I wanted to accept his interpretation, But something nagged at me. The look on Jennifer's face when I'd finished speaking. The complete devastation. The way her world had crumbled in real time. There had been something almost broken about it. My phone buzzed against the table. A text from an unknown number. "Anna, this is Jennifer. I got your number from the reunion contact list. Please, we need to talk. I'm at the hotel bar. I'll wait as long as it takes." I showed the message to David, who snorted in disgust. Are you kidding me? She's still trying to control the narrative. Or maybe she's genuinely sorry. Anna, come on. You saw her there. She was vicious, calculated. She enjoyed making you feel small. People can change, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Some people can. But narcissists? Bullies. They don't change, they just get better at hiding what they are. Another text came through, this one longer. I know you have no reason to trust me, or listen to anything I have to say. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for tonight, but for everything. For high school, for the things I said, for the person I was. You didn't deserve any of it. I was cruel because I was scared. And that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. Please give me a chance to explain. David read over my shoulder, his expression skeptical. Classic manipulation tactics. The non-apology apology, followed by the victim card, followed by the desperate plea for closure. You think she's lying? I think she's exactly who she's always been. Someone who uses whatever tools she has to get what she wants. 20 years ago, those tools were social status and mean girl tactics. Now they're vulnerable and fake regret. A third text arrived. I know you're probably thinking this is just another manipulation, that I'm only sorry because you turned out to be successful. And maybe that's partly true. Maybe I wouldn't have examined my behavior if you hadn't forced me to confront it tonight. But isn't that how growth works? Someone or something forces us to look at ourselves and realize we need to change? I stared at the message, feeling the familiar tug of empathy that had gotten me into trouble so many times before. The part of me that always wanted to believe people could be better, could grow, could change. Don't, David said, reading my expression. Whatever you're thinking, don't. She might be sincere. Or she might be exactly what she's always been. Someone who hurts people and then expects forgiveness when it's convenient for her. My phone rang this time. Jennifer's name on the caller ID. I stared at it for 3 rings before declining the call. Immediately, another text. I understand if you don't want to see me. But I need you to know something. What you said tonight about me never changing. You were right. I've spent 20 years trying to be the same person I was in high school. Trying to maintain the same social hierarchy, the same sense of superiority. It's a miserable way to live. Jesus, David muttered. She's really pulling out all the stops. Robert left me last year. Did you know that? My perfect husband, with his perfect money and his perfect reputation. He left me for someone younger, someone who didn't need to tear other people down to feel good about herself. My charity work? Half of it is just an excuse to feel important, to maintain social connections. My whole life is built on the same shallow foundation it was built on in high school. I felt something twist in my chest. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. The desperation behind the words, the hollowness of a life built on external validation. She's good, David said grimly. I'll give her that. She's hitting every emotional button she can find. What if she means it? Then she should have figured it out before she spent tonight trying to destroy you. Another message came through. I've been thinking about what you said, about how some people stay exactly the same. I looked around that room tonight and realized you were right. We're all still playing the same games, fighting the same battles, desperate to prove we're still relevant. And you? You moved on. You built something real while we were all still pretending to be teenagers. Anna. David's voice was gentle but firm. I need you to really think about this. What could she possibly say that would justify the way she treated you? Not just tonight, but for 4 years of high school? I don't know, I admitted. But doesn't everyone deserve a chance to apologize? To try to make things right? Some things can't be made right. Some wounds don't heal just because someone says they're sorry. I thought about the girl I'd been in high school with, how many nights I'd cry myself to sleep because of Jennifer's cruelty. How many dreams I'd almost given up on because she'd convinced me I wasn't special enough to achieve them. How many times I'd looked in the mirror and seen the worthless person she'd told me I was. You know what the worst part was? I said quietly. It wasn't just the insults, it was the way she made me complicit in my own diminishment. She'd be cruel, and then I'd apologize for existing. She'd exclude me and I'd try harder to fit in. She'd tear me down, and I'd rebuild myself in whatever image I thought might finally earn her approval. David nodded slowly. And now she wants you to do it again. To come running when she calls. To prioritize her feelings over your own boundaries. To give her the absolution she needs to feel better about herself. The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. That was exactly what Jennifer was asking for. Not real accountability, not genuine change, but the comfort of my forgiveness so she could sleep better at night. My phone buzzed with what I hoped would be the final message. I'm gonna stay here until you come down. I know that might seem crazy, but I need you to understand how sorry I am. How much I regret the person I was. How much I want to make this right. I showed David the message, and his expression darkened. Now she's moved into stalker territory. This isn't contrition, Anna. This is manipulation. She's trying to force you into a confrontation by making herself into a victim who's waiting pathetically for your mercy. Or she's genuinely desperate to make amends. Either way, it's not your responsibility to manage her emotional crisis. But even as David spoke, I felt the familiar pull of responsibility. The ingrained need to fix things, to make people feel better, to absorb their pain so they didn't have to carry it. It was the same instinct that had made me vulnerable to Jennifer's manipulation in high school. You know what I think? David said, leaning forward. I think you should go home. To San Francisco. To your real life. To the empire you built and the people who actually value you. Leave Jennifer Morrison to figure out her own mess. Without any closure? What closure could she possibly give you that you haven't already given yourself? You stood up to her tonight. You showed her exactly who you are and what you've accomplished. You won. Don't let her manipulate you into giving that victory back. I stared out the coffee shop window at the Chicago skyline, thinking about the life I'd built on the West Coast. My penthouse apartment with its view of the bay. My companies full of brilliant people working on projects that could change the world. My actual friends, people who knew my worth and treated me accordingly. Bana twana twint. She can't actually make things right, I said slowly, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. Because the damage isn't something that can be undone with an apology. The years I spent believing I wasn't good enough, the opportunities I almost missed because I thought I wasn't worthy, the relationships I sabotaged because I didn't think anyone could really love someone like me. Those things happened. They shaped who I became. But you overcame them, David pointed out. You turned that pain into fuel. You became extraordinary despite what she did to you. Or maybe because of what she did to me, I said. Maybe I needed that anger, that determination to prove her wrong, to drive me to succeed. Does that make what she did okay? No, but it makes it complicated. If I forgive her, am I letting her off the hook? If I don't, am I letting her continue to have power over me? David was quiet for a long moment, considering. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I think, he said carefully, that forgiveness isn't about her. It's about you. It's about whether carrying that anger serves you anymore, or whether it's just another burden you don't need to carry. But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to give her what she wants. Exactly. You can forgive someone without trusting them. You can let go of anger without letting them back into your life. You can choose peace without choosing reconciliation. My phone had been silent for several minutes, but now it buzzed again. This time, the message was different. I understand if you won't see me. I understand if you can't forgive me. But I need you to know that tonight changed me. Seeing what you became, seeing how wrong I was about you, seeing how much damage I did with my cruelty, it changed something fundamental in me. I can't take back what I did, but I can promise to be better, to do better. Thank you for showing me who I really was. Even if you never speak to me again, thank you for that gift. I read the message twice, then handed the phone to David. He read it, his expression unreadable. "Well?" I asked. "It's better," he admitted grudgingly. "Less manipulative. More focused on her own growth than on getting something from you. But you still don't trust it." "I don't trust her. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is whether you can trust yourself to engage with her without losing the clarity you've gained." I looked down at my hands, at the Rolex that had played such a crucial role in tonight's drama. A symbol of success, yes, but also a reminder of how far I'd traveled from the girl who'd been afraid of her own shadow. "I think," I said slowly, "I need to see her. Not for her sake, but for mine. To prove to myself that I can face her without becoming small again." David sighed but nodded. "If that's what you need to do, I'll support you. But I'm coming with you." "David. Non-negotiable. You're not facing her alone. Not after what she put you through tonight." I felt a surge of gratitude for this man who'd been kind to me when kindness was rare, who'd stood by me when I needed an ally, who was willing to protect me even now. "Okay," I said. "Let's set some boundaries." The hotel bar was dimly lit, all dark wood and brass fixtures designed to evoke old-world sophistication. Jennifer sat alone at a corner table, her earlier perfection completely undone. Her makeup was smeared from crying, her designer dress wrinkled, her blonde hair disheveled. She looked like a broken doll, beautiful but fundamentally damaged. When she saw me enter with David, her eyes filled with what looked like genuine relief. She started to stand, then seemed to think better of it, remaining seated as we approached her table. "Anna," she said, her voice hoarse, "thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I replied, settling into the chair across from her. David took the seat beside me, a silent guardian whose presence immediately shifted the dynamic in my favor. Jennifer's eyes darted to David, then back to me. "I was hoping we could talk alone." "David stays," I said firmly. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of him." She nodded quickly, too quickly, like a child desperate to avoid disappointing an adult. It was a side of Jennifer I'd never seen before. Uncertain, vulnerable, stripped of the armor of superiority she'd worn for as long as I'd known her. "I've been sitting here for 2 hours, she began, trying to figure out how to explain what happened tonight, how to make you understand why I was so cruel." "I'm listening," I said, my voice neutral. Jennifer took a shaky breath, her hands wrapped around a glass of wine that looked barely touched. "When I saw you walk into that reunion, I panicked. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. I looked at you and I saw everything I used to be able to control, everything I used to have power over, and I realized I didn't have that power anymore. So you decided to try to take it back," David said, his voice cold. "Yes," Jennifer admitted, not trying to defend herself. "I saw you and I felt threatened, like your presence somehow diminished me. So I did what I've always done when I feel threatened. I attacked." "Why?" I asked. "Why did my existence threaten you?" Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wineglass like it might contain answers. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with a pain I recognized, the deep, aching emptiness of someone who'd built their entire identity on external validation. "Because you were everything I was supposed to be," she said quietly, "smart, driven, focused on things that actually mattered. And I was everything you were supposed to be. Popular, beautiful, socially successful. But somehow you ended up with the life I was supposed to have, and I ended up with this." She gestured at herself, at the wreckage of her perfect facade. "This being what exactly?" I asked. "Empty," she said simply. "Completely and utterly empty. Do you know what I've accomplished in the 20 years since high school? I married well. I threw parties. I organized charity events where I got to feel important for a few hours. I maintained my figure and my friendships and my social media presence. And that's it, that's my entire life." David shifted beside me, his expression softening slightly despite himself. "When Robert left me," Jennifer continued, "he said something that's been haunting me ever since. He said I was the most beautiful, empty person he'd ever met. That I had no substance, no depth, no real purpose beyond maintaining appearances." "That must have been painful," I said, and meant it. It was devastating. But it was also true. I looked at my life and realized I had nothing real to show for it. No career, no passions, no achievements that mattered to anyone but other people playing the same shallow games I was playing. She paused, tears starting to fall again. And then you walked into that reunion, and I saw what real life looked like. What someone could accomplish when they focused on building something meaningful instead of just looking good. And instead of being inspired by you, instead of being proud of someone I knew, I felt diminished, like your success somehow made my failures more obvious. So you tried to tear me down, I said. I tried to make you as small as I felt, she corrected. Because if I could convince everyone that you were still the same nobody you'd been in high school, then maybe I could convince myself that my choices were okay, that popularity and status were still worth something. The honesty in her voice was startling. This wasn't the calculated manipulation I'd expected, but raw, painful self-awareness from someone who'd finally seen herself clearly. Jennifer, I said carefully, what exactly are you asking from me? Nothing, she said quickly. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that what happened tonight wasn't really about you. It was about me and my own insecurities and my terror at realizing how empty my life had become. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling to something that made her wince. I've been reading about you online for the past 2 hours, she said. Your companies, your innovations, the interviews where you talk about using technology to solve real problems. Do you know what I realized? What? You became exactly who you were supposed to become. The girl who spent lunch periods in the computer lab, who talked about artificial intelligence before anyone knew what that meant, who dreamed about changing the world. She grew up to actually do it. Jennifer leaned forward, her voice growing more intense. And I became exactly who I was supposed to become too. The girl who cared more about appearances than substance, who used cruelty to maintain social hierarchy, who measured her worth by other people's opinions. She grew up to be a bitter, empty woman whose husband left her for someone with actual depth. People can change, I said, echoing the words I'd spoken to David earlier. Can they? Jennifer asked. Really? Because I've been trying to figure out how to change, and I don't even know where to start. When your entire identity is built on being better than other people, what do you do when you realize you're not better than anyone? The question hung in the air between us. I found myself studying Jennifer's face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But all I saw was genuine confusion, the lost expression of someone whose entire worldview had crumbled. You start by stopping, David said quietly. Both Jennifer and I turned to look at him, surprised by his contribution to the conversation. Stopping what? Jennifer asked. Measuring yourself against other people. Competing in games that don't matter. Building your identity on what other people think of you. He paused, considering his words. You start by figuring out who you are when no one's watching. When there's no audience to perform for, no hierarchy to maintain. Jennifer stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. But if I'm not better than other people, then what am I? Human, I said simply. Flawed, complex, capable of growth and change and redemption. But human. I don't know how to be just human, she admitted. I've been performing superiorly for so long, I don't remember what's underneath it. I felt something shift inside me, a recognition of the prison Jennifer had built for herself. It was different from my prison, where I'd been trapped by others' low expectations. She'd been trapped by the need to maintain impossibly high ones. But it was a prison nonetheless. Can I ask you something? I said. Jennifer nodded. What do you actually care about? Not what you think you should care about, not what looks good on social media, but what genuinely matters to you. She was quiet for a long time, her brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, she spoke. I used to love to write, she said hesitantly. In elementary school, before I learned that being smart wasn't cool, I wanted to be a journalist. I had this fantasy about uncovering important stories, about using words to make a difference. What happened to that dream? High school happened. Popularity happened. I learned that being the pretty girl who dated the quarterback was more valuable than being the smart girl with opinions. So I buried that part of myself so deep I forgot it existed. And now? Jennifer looked down at her hands, at the expensive manicure and the designer rings that Robert had bought her. Now I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen differently. If I'd focused on developing my mind instead of perfecting my image. If I'd competed in things that actually mattered instead of social hierarchies that were always going to be temporary. She looked up at me, her eyes clear for the first time all evening. I read about your first company tonight. The one that predicted consumer behavior. Do you know what struck me most about the article? What? The interviewer asked you about your motivation, and you said you wanted to solve problems that mattered. That you weren't interested in building something just to get rich, but to make a difference. She paused. When was the last time I did something because it mattered, not because it made me look good? I didn't answer, because we both knew the question was rhetorical. I've spent 20 years as a professional mean girl, Jennifer continued, using my looks and my social connections to maintain a position that was always temporary. And now I'm 38 years old, divorced, with no real skills and no real purpose, watching someone I tortured in high school get featured on the cover of Forbes. You saw that article? I asked, surprised. It came out 3 months ago. The Quiet Revolutionary, How Anna Chen is Reshaping Quantum Computing. I read it sitting in my empty house, thinking about the girl I used to mock for being too smart, too ambitious, too willing to dream big. She reached into her purse again, this time pulling out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to me, and I unfolded it to find a printed copy of the Forbes article, worn soft from handling. I've been carrying this around since it was published, she said. Every time I felt sorry for myself, every time I thought about how unfair life was, I'd read it and remember that success isn't an accident. It's the result of choices, day after day, year after year. I stared at the article, at my own face smiling back from the glossy page. It was surreal, seeing this piece of my professional life in Jennifer's hands, worn smooth by her repeated examination. Why? I asked. Because it reminded me of who I could have been if I'd made different choices. If I'd been brave enough to pursue substance instead of style. If I'd been smart enough to build something real instead of maintaining something fake. David leaned forward, his skepticism clearly warring with something that might have been sympathy. So what now? He asked. What do you do with this revelation? Jennifer folded the article carefully, putting it back in her purse like it was something precious. I don't know, she said honestly. I'm 38 years old with no career, no education, no real skills. I have a settlement from my divorce that will keep me comfortable for a while, but after that, she shrugged helplessly. You could go back to school, I suggested. Study journalism, if that's what you're passionate about. At my age? Competing with 20-year-olds who haven't spent 2 decades atrophying their brains with social media and gossip? Age is just a number, David said. And experience, even the wrong kind of experience, can be valuable if you know how to use it. Jennifer looked at him with something that might have been hope. You think so? I think, I said slowly, that recognizing the problem is the first step to solving it. And you've done that tonight. Painfully, publicly, but honestly. What's the second step? I thought about my own journey, about the years of failure and rejection and grinding work that had led to my success. About the countless nights I'd questioned whether I was fooling myself, whether I was really capable of achieving my dreams. The second step, I said, is deciding that the person you were isn't the person you have to be, that the choices you made don't define the choices you can make. Jennifer nodded slowly, like she was trying to absorb the concept. And the third step? The third step, David said with a slight smile, is getting to work. For the first time since I'd known her, Jennifer's smile looked genuine. Not performative, not calculated, but real. I have a lot of work to do, she said. Yes, I agreed. You do. Will you? She started, then stopped herself. No, never mind. What? I was going to ask if you'd help me, but that's not fair. I spent 20 years being cruel to you, and now I want to benefit from your success? That's exactly the kind of entitled thinking that got me into this mess. I studied her face, looking for manipulation, for calculation, for any sign that this was another performance. But all I saw was genuine remorse and the tentative hope of someone who'd finally seen a path forward. "Jennifer," I said carefully, "I can't fix your life for you. I can't undo the choices you've made or the time you've lost. But I can tell you this. It's never too late to become who you're supposed to be." "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me what that looks like." 3 blocks away from the hotel, my Tesla waited like a silver promise in the darkness. The walk through Chicago's late-night streets felt different now. Not like an escape, but like a procession towards something inevitable. David walked beside me in comfortable silence while Jennifer had remained at the hotel, staring into her wine glass and contemplating the ruins of her carefully constructed life. "You know," David said as we approached the car, "when I woke up this morning, I never would have predicted the night would end like this. With Jennifer Morrison having an existential crisis in a hotel bar, with you showing more grace to your worst enemy than she ever showed to you." He paused, studying my profile in the streetlight. "That took real strength, Anna. The kind of strength that can't be taught or bought." I pressed the button on the key fob, and the Tesla's lights flashed in greeting. The car was exactly as I'd left it, pristine, powerful, and utterly mine. But somehow it felt different now, less like a trophy and more like what it actually was, a tool that got me from one place to another. "Want to see something?" I asked David as we reached the vehicle. He nodded, curious. I opened the driver's door and reached into the center console, pulling out a small, worn leather journal. The cover was cracked with age, the pages yellowed and soft from years of handling. "What is it?" David asked. "My goals journal from senior year of high school," I said, running my fingers over the familiar texture. "I started it after that computer science presentation, the one where everyone laughed at me." I opened it to a page I'd memorized long ago, though I hadn't looked at it in years. My 18-year-old handwriting stared back at me, earnest and determined despite everything. "Read it," I said, handing him the journal. David held it carefully, like it was something precious. Which, I supposed it was. "Goal number 1, he read aloud. "Start a company that uses artificial intelligence to solve real problems. Goal number 2, prove that success isn't about who you know or how popular you are, but about the value you create. Goal number 3. He paused, looking up at me. "Goal number 3. Come back to a reunion and show them who I really am." I wrote that the night after Jennifer told me I'd never be special, I said. I was so angry, so hurt, but also so determined. That girl knew exactly who she wanted to become. "And she became her," David said, closing the journal gently. "Every single goal accomplished." "Not quite every goal," I said, taking the journal back. "There's one more page." I flipped to the very back, to words I'd written in a different ink, with a different pen, during a different phase of my life. "Goal number 4, I read. Learn to forgive them, not for their sake, but for mine. Because carrying anger is like carrying poison, and I refuse to let them poison the life I've built." David was quiet for a long moment, processing what I'd shared. "When did you write that one?" 3 years ago, I said. "After my second company sold, I was sitting in my penthouse, surrounded by everything I'd ever dreamed of having. And I realized I was still angry. Still carrying the hurt from high school like a weight I couldn't put down. And now?" I looked back toward the hotel, where Jennifer was probably still sitting alone with her revelations and regrets. Where Brad was likely still trying to process how the ghost girl had become more successful than all of them combined. Where the popular kids were confronting the reality that their 15 minutes of fame had ended 20 years ago. "Now I feel free," I said honestly. "Not because they apologized or because I got revenge, but because I finally understand that their opinions never mattered. Their cruelty said everything about them and nothing about me." David smiled, and I could see something like pride in his expression. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you were always special. They were just too small to see." We stood there for a moment, 2 former outcasts who'd found their way to success through different paths but with the same determination. The city hummed around us, full of people living their own stories, facing their own challenges, becoming their own versions of who they were meant to be. So what now? David asked. Back to San Francisco? Back to your empire? Eventually, I said. But first, I think I want to drive around the city for a while. See how it's changed, how I've changed. Maybe visit some of the places that shaped me. The library where you used to eat lunch? Among other places. I paused, considering. Want to come along? I promise the car is more comfortable than that Honda rental. David grinned. Are you kidding? I've been dying to ride in one of these things. We settled into the Tesla's luxurious interior, the seats adjusting automatically to accommodate us. The dashboard lit up with a soft blue glow, and the car came to life with barely a whisper of sound. This is incredible, David said, running his hands over the pristine leather. It's like being in a spaceship. A spaceship that can go from 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, I said, pulling away from the curb with the kind of smooth acceleration that electric motors made possible. We drove through the streets of our shared past, pointing out landmarks and sharing memories. The high school looked smaller than I remembered. The building where I'd spent 4 years feeling invisible was now just another structure in a city full of them. The library where I'd found refuge looked the same, its windows glowing warmly in the night. You know what's funny? David said as we passed the community college where I'd started my education. I always wondered what happened to you after graduation. I used to Google your name sometimes, hoping to find out where you'd ended up. And for the longest time there was nothing. No social media, no professional profiles, no trace of Anna Chen anywhere online. I was busy building instead of broadcasting, I said. Besides, I wasn't ready to be found. Not until I'd become someone worth finding. But you were always worth finding, David said gently. Success didn't make you valuable, Anna. You were valuable all along. The words hit me harder than I'd expected. It was a truth I'd spent years learning to accept, the understanding that my worth wasn't tied to my achievements, even though my achievements had been necessary to prove it to myself. We drove past Jennifer's childhood home, a stately colonial in an exclusive neighborhood that screamed old money and established privilege. The house was dark, its windows reflecting our headlights like empty eyes. Do you think she'll actually change? David asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Change is hard, especially when you're starting from scratch at 38. But recognizing the need to change? That's the first step. She seemed genuine tonight. Broken, but genuine. She was, and maybe that's enough. Maybe rock bottom is the foundation some people need to build something real. My phone buzzed with a notification. A message from my assistant back in San Francisco. The TechCrunch article is live, I read aloud. They expedited it because of the viral video from tonight. The headline is, "The reunion heard round Silicon Valley, when a tech titan returns home." David laughed. You're famous for being famous now. How does that feel? Weird, I admitted. I never wanted to be a public figure. I just wanted to build things that mattered. Well, you've done that, multiple times over. We pulled up to the lake, the same body of water where I used to come during high school, when the weight of social isolation became too much to bear. I'd sit on a bench and plan my escape, dreaming of a life where intelligence was valued over popularity, where substance mattered more than style. This place, I said, parking the car and looking out over the dark water. This is where I used to dream. What did you dream about? Everything I have now, I said simply. Success, respect, the power to never be dismissed again. But also things I didn't get. Friends who valued me for who I was, a sense of belonging, the confidence to take up space without apologizing for it. And do you have those things now? I thought about my life in San Francisco, the brilliant colleagues who challenged and inspired me, the entrepreneurs I mentored who looked up to me with genuine respect, the conferences where I spoke to audiences who hung on every word because they valued my expertise. Some of them, I said. Enough of them. What about the rest? I'm still learning, I admitted. Success can be isolating in its own way. When you're known for your achievements, it's hard to know if people like you for who you are or what you've accomplished. Maybe that's why tonight mattered, David said thoughtfully. Not because you proved yourself to them, but because you proved something to yourself. What's that? That you don't need their validation anymore. That their opinions, positive or negative, don't define your worth. He was right. The girl who'd walked into that reunion had still been carrying the weight of their judgment, still measuring herself against their expectations. But the woman sitting in this car now felt fundamentally different. Lighter. Free. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from an unknown number. I was about to decline it when I realized it might be important. Perhaps someone from my company with an urgent issue. Hello? Anna? This is Mrs. Henderson. I hope you don't mind me calling so late. Mrs. Henderson, I said, surprised. Not at all. How did you get my number? I have my ways, she said with a chuckle. I wanted to check on you after tonight. That was quite a dramatic exit you made. It was long overdue, I said. Yes. I imagine it was. But I also wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking about our conversation in the lobby, and I realized I never properly congratulated you on your success. Thank you, but let me finish, dear. What you've accomplished is extraordinary, but it's not just the companies or the money that impresses me. It's the fact that you never let them break your spirit. Despite everything they did to make you feel small, you kept believing in yourself. I felt tears prick at my eyes, unexpected and warm. I almost didn't, I admitted. There were times when I almost gave up, when their voices in my head were louder than my own dreams. But you didn't give up. And that's what makes you truly special, Anna. Not your wealth or your achievements, but your refusal to accept their limitations as your own. Mrs. Henderson, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think people can really change? Not just their circumstances, but their fundamental nature? She was quiet for a moment, considering the question. I think, she said finally, that people can choose to become who they were always meant to be. Sometimes it takes a crisis, sometimes it takes success, sometimes it takes someone else showing them a different way. But yes, I believe people can change, if they truly want to. Even people like Jennifer. Especially people like Jennifer. Because people who've caused pain often understand pain in ways that can make them particularly effective at healing it, if they choose that path. After we hung up, David and I sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights reflect on the water like fallen stars. You know what the strangest part of tonight was? I said eventually. What? Realizing that I don't hate them anymore. Any of them. Jennifer, Brad, even the ones who just stood by and watched while I was being torn down. I don't hate them because I finally understand that their cruelty was never about me. It was about their own insecurity. Exactly. Jennifer needed to tear me down to feel superior. Brad needed to mock my dreams to feel secure in his own mediocrity. They were all so afraid of being ordinary that they couldn't recognize actual excellence when they saw it. And now? Now they're facing the reality that peak popularity at 18 doesn't translate to lifelong success. That being the king or queen of high school means nothing in the real world. I started the car again, the electric motor humming to life with silent power. Where to now? David asked. The airport, I said. It's time to go home. Back to your real life. Back to my real life, I agreed. Where I'm surrounded by people who see my value. Where my ideas are respected. Where I can build things that matter without having to prove my worth first. As we drove through the sleeping city, I thought about the girl I'd been when I left this place 20 years ago. Scared, angry, determined to prove them all wrong. She would be amazed by the woman I'd become, by the empire I'd built, by the confidence I'd earned through years of hard work and countless small victories. But more than that, she'd be proud that I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all, that their approval was never worth having, and their disapproval was never worth fearing. The highway stretched out before us, leading away from the past and toward a future that was entirely mine to shape. In my rearview mirror, Chicago sparkled like a discarded jewelry box, beautiful but no longer precious. You know what I'm going to do when I get back to San Francisco? I said to David. What? I'm going to take that goal journal and write one more entry. What goal could you possibly have left? I smiled, feeling something settle into place inside my chest. Something that felt like peace. Goal number 5, I said. Live like someone who has nothing left to prove. The Tesla carried us through the night toward the airport, toward my private jet, toward the life I'd built with my own hands and my own dreams. Behind us, the reunion continued without me, a gathering of people still trying to relive their teenage glory. But I was done looking backward. I was finally completely ready to embrace the future I'd earned. And it was going to be extraordinary. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.